Warning: this video contains scenes that some may find distressing. Well, you fucking should find them distressing. It was bloody awful. Barking. That was the team my cat supported. Before I begin, I've got to mention a big source of research for this video. Yes, I read a third fucking book. If that doesn't warrant a subscribe, I don't know what does. Anyway, the book was called The Unofficial Everton Timeline 2014 to 2024, The Mashiri Years. It's a good book, I recommend it. Oh yeah, by the way, I apologise if this video looks a bit weird in some places. That was to get around the fucking copyright bollocks. If you want to see the original versions of all 3 videos, please head over to Patreon. It's only $3, it'll be massively helping me out. Link in the description. Anyway, let's get on with it. Despite the on-field success of the previous seasons, it had not exactly been mirrored in the club's bank balance, because as Everton's revenue had increased with their on-pitch performances, in order to get them there, so had their expenditure, particularly on transfer fees and wages. 2009 alone would see player wages go from 44.5 million to 49 million, which is a 10.3% increase. In the prior 6 years, they'd only broken even once and recorded a profit once, that being the season that they sold Wayne Rooney. In 2006, they'd lose 10.8 million, followed by 9.4 million in 2007, and this year 2009 would end with them losing 6.9 million. By the end of 2009, the club's losses from the previous 4 seasons would total 27.1 million. While the club showed ambition by breaking club transfer records in the previous 3 consecutive seasons, is certainly to be applauded. The same can't be said for the financial risks incurred in the process. With a loan taken out in 2007 to Barclays Bank against future television income, which Everton relied on for their revenue stream a lot more than other Premier League clubs, 2 more loans with the boutique bank Adam & Company by the 2008-09 season meant Everton had 12 outstanding loans against their property and assets. The most worrying being a £30 million loan from Prudential, which will cost them £68 million to repay over a 25-year term, and will be repaid in a securitisation agreement serviced by future season ticket sales and matchday ticket sales. This situation could have been further exacerbated if proposals for the club's planned 50,000-seater stadium were not rejected in November of 2009. The stadium, named the Kirby Project, aka Destination Kirby, was part of a plan by Tesco to build a retail park in Kirby, with the supermarket chain covering £52 million of the building costs. Every little helps. I don't care, that's a cheesy joke, I'm leaving it in. Shame's overrated.
Tesco were gonna buy it, we're gonna build our stadium.
Could have been Lidl, could have been worse.
Could have been. Do you reckon? Yeah, do you reckon that would have Netto would have been worse?
Netto, I was just thinking Netto. I was thinking, what was the name of that shop? Yeah. Everton would have to pay 78 million, which after the sale of Goodison, Belfield and the new stadium's naming rights would see the club have to take out more debts to pay for it. How class would it be if Asda's or Sainsbury's bought the naming rights? Oh, what a move. Kendrick Lamar level shit housing that would be. Nevertheless, the plan fell through due to it damaging green space or some bollocks. However, this was probably for the club's own good, as this was largely an unpopular plan.
So the Kirby project was, an initiative for us to get a new stadium, essentially, in Kirby, which is an area in Knowsley. So right off the bat, no offense to people from Knowsley, but it's not really, not really Liverpool. It is, but it's not. So for us to move from like Walton, which is proper Scouse area, got all that culture behind it. Even that in a thing is just like was never going to work. People were going to fume, and they did immediately. It was just like, you're moving us to Kirby, it's fucking miles away. Getting there, transportation would have been an absolute nightmare.
However, this new stadium plan was seen by many as a last hope to significantly increase the club's revenue, which lagged behind a lot of other Premier League clubs. In 1999, the club's net assets were 18.5 million. 10 years later, their net liabilities were 26.7 million. Everton's financial situation looked so bleak, another chief executive, Keith Wyness, had resigned in July of 2008. Supposedly among the reasons were the failure of the Kirby project and Sir Philip Green's huge influence over the club. Bill Kenwright, the Everton loyalist, had run out of money, and by 2009 had unsuccessfully been trying to sell the club. Now, Everton were not the only club saddled by a load of debt in 2009, as Premier League clubs owed a total of £3.1 billion in bank overdrafts, loans and other borrowings. However, 15 of the 20 Premier League clubs were subsidised by their owners, who would give the clubs interest-free loans, whereas Everton were in debt to the banks and therefore were not so lucky. The 2009-2010 season would see UEFA's financial fair play regulations agreed, which were brought in with good intentions to stop financial doping, to stop clubs spending more than they actually brought in. However, these regulations would prove to be a double-edged sword, as they effectively acted as the pulling up of a drawbridge behind the clubs who had already big investments, like Manchester City, Chelsea and PSG, creating an old money and a new money dynamic, as it would be the clubs who would receive investments going forward who would be the ones most negatively affected by this. Everton's place in the hierarchy of the game was rubber-stamped in the summer with the £22 million transfer of Joleon Lescott to Manchester City. As good as 5th place Everton were, they were still a selling club. And even though they're undoubtedly keen not to make this FA Cup final the end of the quest to break into that footballing elite, unless they would get their own cash injection, this may be as far as they could go. Nevertheless, Moyes did still have some money to spend in the summer, getting among others Dinyar Biliar, that geezer over there, for 8.5 million, Sylvain Distin for 5 million, and John Heitinger for 6 million. Everton had a season beset by injuries, which was pretty much a season of two halves. The first half was pretty bad, but they somehow managed to turn it around with an incredible run of form, which saw them beat Chelsea, Manchester United and Manchester City. They ended up finishing 8th, only missing out on European qualification by 2 points. The 2010 summer transfer window saw Moyes working with a shoestring budget. However, he did still manage to make some good acquisitions, like Jermaine Beckford, who joined on a free transfer. The season would play out like the last one. It started off not too good, but finished strong, with good wins over Chelsea, Man City and a 3-3 cracker with Manchester United. They also took 4 points off Liverpool that season, the bastards. Once again, they had to battle injuries, but still finished a respectable 7th place, only missing out on European qualification due to other teams qualifying through the domestic cups. The season looked even more impressive when you take into account that Everton's squad had got weaker with the sale of Steven Pienaar, who only had 6 months left on his contract, forcing Everton to have to sell unless risking the unaffordable fate of not getting a transfer fee. Their rough financial situation was about to get even worse in the summer. Not only for a second successive season did David Moyes not have the money to significantly strengthen the team, but on deadline day, Everton were forced to sell Jermaine Beckford, Yakubu, and worst of all, Mikel Arteta. Yes, after a bitter transfer saga, Mikel Arteta finally joined Arsenal, as in the dying moments of the transfer window, he signed on the dotted line. And he usually hates those.
Likes of QPR, Stoke, Bolton, they're all outspending us, and they've all got ambition. This board has got no ambition whatsoever.
The real sadness was it happened so late, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We had no time at all to do anything. It happened I think about 8 o'clock in the evening, and that was what we didn't enjoy.
The club had lost their best player, and their player described as the team's metronome. Their posters would also look significantly worse. Or, if I was. The Arteta deal particularly stung, as they had to accept a bid of 10 million, half of the player's £20 million evaluation.
Baby, come back. You can blame it all on me. I was wrong, and I just can't live without you.
Everton were financially fucked, and you probably don't need me to tell you this, but the Arteta money went straight to the banks.
Where's the Arteta money?
Have some. How much are you selling for, Bill?
Have a few answers, please, Bill. Name your price, Bill.
Sell for the debt, Bill.
That one was where the relationship with the board really hit its peak and its downfall, if you like. Because I mean, it was already been brewing for a very long time, obviously, and he was so inept and he was so fucking just idiotic. I think that was just the one that really broke the hearts of the Evertonians, and we really just wanted Ken Wright out and everyone else in the background as well, out of the in that side of it, yeah.
2011 would see Everton's financial outlook become even more bleak. Barclays Bank and Investec weren't willing to extend the club's lines of credit, so they signed a mortgage deed with Vibrac Corporation. This was for a £14 million 1-year loan, which replaced a mortgage agreed with Investec 12 months previously. Prior agreements had only borrowed against the same season's broadcast income. However, this agreement was borrowing against their broadcast income for the future. In particular, the 2012-13 season. This is particularly bad for Everton, who rely on their broadcast revenue a lot more than other clubs. In recent seasons, it accounted for up to 61% of the club's annual income. All the while, the club's wage bill continued to grow from 58 million in the prior season to 63.4 million for the 2011-12 season. Wages now accounted for 75% of turnover as the club's annual debt grew to 46 million. Bill Kenwright would end up meeting with investors, ones who football financier Keith Harris introduced him to. One claimed to control a hedge fund and be an inventor. The other one claimed to be head of ICI in the Far East. Instead, they just turned out to be a bloke living in Manchester and a bloke living in a 1-bedroom flat. To be fair, in this housing market, that's pretty good. You got your own place, do you flash bastard? This embarrassment would only further harm Bill Kenwright's image and chip away at any faith that Everton supporters might have had in him. To make things even worse, conversations between Bill Kenwright and fan groups leaked out.
Come on, Bill. Where's the Arteta money, Bill?
Didn't you used to speak to all the Everton fans, Bill? Didn't you send a letter to Dave Hickson when he left? Am I going to have to send one to Rodwell or Barkley?
Really did speak to all the Everton fans. We haven't spoken to all my life until your Blue Union really betrayed betrayed this club.
Who's betrayed the club? How dare you? You saddled it with debt. You betrayed the club, Bill.
However, amongst all the unrest, Everton managed to have another decent season. They got some big wins over Tottenham, Chelsea, Manchester City, and finished the season 7th, above Liverpool. They got to the FA Cup semi-finals, in which they played out a Merseyside derby at Wembley. They lost, but never mind. The bit of money they did spend on Niko Jelavic paid off, as he scored 11 goals in all competitions and won the Premier League Player of the Month award for April. And academy product Ross Barkley came up to the senior squad and was looking proper decent. But none of this could change the fact that Everton were financially fucked. Everton were now forced into the position that most of us are these days, which is to rent rather than buy, as Everton would increasingly have to loan players in, getting a returning Landon Donovan and Steven Pienaar, and Royston Drenthe would also come on loan over the course of the season. Anyone heard Royston Drenthe's music, by the way? It's not bad. Not bad. Probably. Don't know what the lyrics are.
Heb mijn keuzes gemaakt, wil mijn pokkels lang en breed. Zie me daar in David Lloyd. Blijf ik trainen op die flow. Blijf ik klimmen met mijn zoon.
Oh shit, I didn't know Randy Marsh featured on this.
Blijf ik klimmen met mijn zoon.
I am Lord,
In the summer of 2012, they would actually make some permanent transfers, such as Steven Pienaar for 4.5 million, Kevin Morelos for 6.5 million, Brian Oviedo for 3 million, and John Stones for 3 million. To pay for these transfers, they would see quite a lot of outgoings, such as Jack Rodwell going to Manchester City for 12 million, and we'd say goodbye to a modern day club legend, Tim Cahill. The departure of an even bigger club legend hung over the club all season, as David Moyes' contract was close to being up and he was linked with a move away to Tottenham. Even though he ended up not going to Tottenham, he was quite non-committal about his contract situation when he was asked. He was like a geezer on Love Island who didn't want to be closed off. Looking at you, Harrison, you dodgy cunt you.
But I have to say, I'd met a couple other clubs. I'd met a couple of really big clubs who'd approached me and phoned me and spoke to me. You know, what was I doing? Would I be interested? The truth is, I don't think I'd have left for any of them because Everton had been so good to me. But I was also wary about overstaying your welcome at Everton.
The season again was quite decent. They'd get wins over Manchester United and they got draws against Arsenal and Liverpool, which of course saw that Suarez celebration, which might not have been a happy memory for Everton fans, but I enjoyed it. They finished the season 6th, above Liverpool once again, but it wasn't quite good enough to finish in Europe. As much as he loved the club, without new investment, David Moyes might have thought that he'd taken Everton as far as he could. The Moyesiah had run out of miracles, and on the 9th of May, the news came that David Moyes would be leaving Everton at the end of the season. He'd be taking over from Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United.
Dropped my wife off at the shopping centre and I drove out to Sir Alex's house and he said, I'm retiring and you're the next manager of Manchester United.
Phil Neville also left that season as well. Kind of gets a bit forgotten about because he was injured, but still another big blow to the club. Even though there were no trophies, over a decade of consistent overachieving gained Moyes much admiration among the Everton fans. However, that admiration was about to turn to acrimony, as in the transfer market, the new Manchester United manager tried to lowball his old club for Leighton Baines and Marouane Fellaini for 28 million. This offer would value Fellaini at 16 million, 1 million less than Everton paid for him. This deal was seen as especially predatory due to Moyes knowing firsthand just how bad the club's financial situation was, and that it was made not long after the players 23.5 million release clause had lapsed. Everton would hold out for 27.5 million, so not such a bad deal in the end. But yeah, bad Moyes, what you doing, mate? What you doing? So the club needed a new manager. Bill Kenwright spoke with a wide variety of candidates, from internal ones such as David Weir and Alan Stubbs, and external ones such as Vitor Pereira and Ralph Rangnick. They were also linked with Neal Maupay, Neil Lennon and Michael Laudrup. However, on the 5th of June, the job was given to the frontrunner, Roberto Martinez. Roberto Martinez had taken Swansea City from League One to the Championship and won the FA Cup with Wigan Athletic, giving me the only watchable moment from that fucking All or Nothing series. Yeah, fucking have it. Martinez had also just got Wigan relegated, but he does look good in a suit, so you never know, this might turn out okay. Despite sales of some key players like Marouane Fellaini and Victor Anichibi, Everton had quite a positive transfer window, getting in Gerard Deulofeu, Gareth Barry and Romelu Lukaku on loan. They also made some permanent signings such as Aruna Kone for 6 million and James McCarthy for 13 million. The season was actually really good. Martinez bettered Moyes' finish the previous season by getting 5th with 72 points, the most they had had since the 1986-87 title winning season. They went on a 7-game winning run, beating Arsenal 3-0. They also beat Chelsea and did the double over Manchester United, helping to get Moyes the sack. Martinez also made Everton easier on the eye. Off the pitch, the club also had a great season, recording a record profit of 28.2 million and reducing their debt by more than 17 million to 28.1 million. The next season, they would break their transfer record, making Lukaku's signing permanent for 28 million. 28 million for a player like Lukaku would prove to be a bargain. These days, that's the price of a Labubu. They got some more loans in like Christian Atsu and Aaron Lennon, and they made some free transfers like signing Gareth Barry to a permanent deal and getting Samuel fucking Eto'o. A 33-year-old Samuel Eto'o, but still, up front they had Lukaku and Eto'o. Surely Everton were about to have an amazing season. Nope. No, they did not. Everton's pre-season was seen by many as underwhelming. I mean, it would do after you beat a team 22-0 in the previous pre-season. They were criticised for their lack of quality opponents, as they consisted of Tranmere, Leicester City, Celta Vigo, Porto and Paderborn. I mean, they might as well have visited a brothel. Also in pre-season, Ross Barkley would be injured. This meant Lukaku, who was scheduled for an extended break due to the World Cup, had to come straight in. His fitness was clearly not up to speed, and as a result, he picked up heel and toe injuries. The team in general didn't look like they had the best fitness levels at the start of the season, and it showed in the results. James McCarthy would go on to pick up an injury in November, which severely weakens their defence. The club also struggled to cope with the addition of European football, suffering bad results directly after European games. Martinez was rigid in his belief that Everton should play possession-based football, like Barcelona. However, Everton didn't have Barcelona's players. Also, the fabled second season syndrome seemed to be kicking in, as Martinez seemed to have been found out. All of this resulted in Everton finishing 11th. The summer saw them make some good additions. Ramiro Funes Mori for 9.5 million, Tom Cleverley, Gerard Deulofeu and Aaron Lennon became permanent transfers, and in February they would add Senegalese Omar Niasse for 13 million. However, despite this, the next season was pretty much the same as the last one. Everton played some lovely football, they kept possession well, playing some great passes. On the attack, they were box office. However, defensively, they were more like the Australian office.
What do people want to see? Why are people talking about us this season? It's not because of clean sheets, because of goals. And they went for it.
Who, Everton?
Yeah.
They weren't thinking that. We can't do anything at the back.
Well, maybe that is Martinez's thinking. As long as there's goals, he's happy.
Yeah, he probably is, and I'm happy as well.
They finished 11th in the league. However, in the League Cup, they had a 5-3 banger with Barnsley. They beat Reading, Norwich and Middlesbrough en route to a semi-final tie with Manchester City. They would beat Manchester City 2-1 in the first leg. And in the second leg, they would even extend their aggregate lead to 3-1. However, City would then do what City does. They came back courtesy of scoring a goal from Raheem Sterling's cross that had already gone out of play. And sadly for Everton, it would be Man City who would make it to the final. Sadly for us too, fuck's sake. However, in the FA Cup, they would then go on another incredible run, beating Chelsea in the quarter-finals, but once again, who came along to ruin everyone's fun? Manchester United.
Oh, he stepped beyond Besic. Fellaini! Marouane Fellaini scores against his former club. It's Romelu Lukaku. Saved by De Gea brilliantly. Ultimate goal! Chris Smalling providing salvation for Everton. Herrera. Oh, he's got it back to Martial, who has surely won it for Manchester United.
It would ultimately be another underwhelming season for the club, as they missed yet another opportunity to end their cup drought. The FA Cup exit would be followed by a 3-0 loss to Sunderland, leaving Everton with 2 wins from their last 12 games. This would prove all too much for Roberto Martinez to rebound from, and on the 12th of May, he was sacked, costing 11.3 million to get rid of.
But I think totally and utterly a disappointing season, and I can't get my head around anyone who thinks Martinez should still be there. I really can't. Even Martinez's missus wanted him to go.
But just who was it who was doing the sacking? It was the new majority stakeholder. As on the 27th of February, after a long 18-month saga, it was announced that Iranian billionaire Farhad Moshiri was the long-awaited new investor that Everton seeked.
The exciting thing is, and the big thing is that he's a man with Premier League credentials. You know, he's been involved in Arsenal. He knows how things are run, you know, in this country. He knows about the Premier League. And obviously it's been going on for quite a while. So it's a good, you know, it's a really, really good thing. And probably a little bit of a safer bet than, say, the others who were floated around.
When he and Alisher Usmanov were owners of 30% of the shares of Arsenal Football Club before they arrived at Everton, they had a very stable situation. They weren't running the club. They were very much on the outside, being kept on the outside by Stan Kroenke, who didn't want them to be in the club. But when they arrived in 2007, the Emirates Stadium was already built.
The guy's been sat there for the last 8-9 years or so, want to take control. Obviously got loads of ideas, loads of vision, loads of energy.
They sat, I'm sure, in their comfy seats in the executive box of Red and White Holdings and enjoyed the new stadium with 65,000 spectators, but they hadn't actually been involved in building it.
It's just really, really... that's the best. It almost seems like it's too...
Don't say
perfect.
Farhad Moshiri had just sold his 15% stake in Arsenal to friend, business partner and all-round shady fucker Alisher Usmanov, and used the proceeds to buy 49.9% of Everton for 87.5 million, making him the largest stakeholder in the club. It would be alleged that Alisher Usmanov also had shares in the club, and he was alleged to be involved in high-level decision-making at the club, like appointing new managers, and was allegedly in the room for the job interviews. Again, all of this is alleged, don't sue me. so Farhad Moshiri was the club's new majority shareholder, probably, and he gave Everton an £80 million interest-free loan with no guaranteed repayment date. So on the 31st of May, Everton's £54.8 million debt was gone. Aside from the loan to Moshiri, Everton were now effectively debt-free. For a bit. Because on the 26th of August 2016, they took out another loan to the very shady company Rights and Media Funding Limited. The loan was spread out over 6 payments between 2016 and 2022 and was rumoured to carry an interest rate of 12%, with the debt rising to 200 million by 2023. The interest reportedly cost 460,000 a week. But forget that for now. At this precise moment, heading towards the close of the 2015-16 season, things were looking up for the club. They had David Unsworth and Joe Royle taking charge of the club on a temporary basis. They appointed Ronald Koeman as manager, who'd done a great job at Southampton, and for the first time they appointed a director of football, Leicester City's Steve Walsh, who Sir Alex Ferguson described as the most influential figure in the 2015-16 title race. I'm sure Vardy wouldn't be happy to hear that. Bill Kenwright would remain chairman of the club, and Moshiri would follow through on his promise of giving Koeman a transfer war chest, as they spent 81 million over the course of the season, bringing in Ashley Williams for 9 million on a 3-year contract worth 10.8 million, Yannick Bolasie for 22 million on a 5-year contract worth 19.5 million, Ademola Lookman, Morgan Schneiderlin for 20 million on a 4-year contract worth 20.8 million, Enner Valencia, Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Idrissa Gueye, among others. Moshiri also promised to keep hold of the club's best players, which he didn't really follow through on as much, as John Stones would leave to go to Manchester City. I mean, it was for 50 million, so that's not a bad price. They did hold on to Lukaku. On the pitch, Everton started the season incredibly, sitting in third by mid-September. Defensively, they'd improved. The players' fitness and work rate both looked to have gotten better. Results dropped off a bit as the season went on, but progress had definitely been made as the season saw some great results and performances, including a 4-0 demolition of Manchester City. Yeah, have it. Everton would finish the season in 7th. Also, in January, Usmanov's company USM Holdings would sponsor the club's training ground for 30 million. Pays to have friends in high places. Not judging, by the way. I'll accept an oligarch's funding any day of the week. If any of them are listening, email in the description. Give me a shout. The summer would see some big departures like Gerard Deulofeu, Tom Cleverley, and a day everyone knew was coming, Romelu Lukaku. Even though Everton got a massive fee for the geezer, 90 million with add-ons, which in retrospect proved to be daylight robbery considering how his Manchester United career would go, this was still a sad day. This meant that despite a new owner, Everton was still a selling club. But they were a buying club also, as in the summer they got in Davy Klaassen for 23 million, Jordan Pickford for 30 million, Michael Keane for 30 million, Sandro Ramirez on a 4-year contract worth 13.5 million, Gylfi Sigurdsson for 44.5 million on a 3-year contract worth 10.8 million, Nikola Vlasic for 10 million, and Wayne fucking Rooney. A 31-year-old Wayne Rooney, who was on a 2-year contract worth 16.8 million, but still, the prodigal potato had returned. Everton had spent 140 million, and that spending in time proved to be a heavy millstone that hung around the neck of the club. With the players signed to big contracts, other clubs would struggle to match, especially if some of those players turned out to be shit. Or pedos. Allegedly.
In terms of governance, there was no dissenting voices around the boardroom table. No one saying, no, that's not right, Mr. Mashir, we can't do that. And so you look at that time, Ronald Koeman was manager, huge amounts of money was spent on players, many of whom turned out to be rather ineffective.
But we thought we had all this money to spend on players, and we're spending shite left, right, and centre. We bought 3 centre attacking mids in one transfer window. He bought so many just trash players. Just put them on really, really high wages. Like Sandro Ramirez is on like 90k a week. Why?
These signings would come back to bite Everton, as most of them didn't live up to their potential, and when they went out on loan, Everton would often have to cover a lot of the wages.
But those 15 players, if you add together their salaries and the transfer fees, accounted for 500 million, £500 million of Mashiri's cash going out the door. And that period in 2017 you refer to, Thomas, was when that all began, when that splash the cash era began. And, it may have seemed okay at the time, but it was always going to be, it would always end in tears.
Also, all the new additions and the addition of European qualification meant the task of making this group of players into a team was even harder. The transfer strategy came into serious question, as it looked like Steve Walsh was interested in younger players with a look to the club's long-term interest, whereas Koeman was interested in more established players with more of a short-term view. The uncoordinated strategy resulted in an uncoordinated squad, and it didn't go well. After 4 points from the first 2 games, Everton went on a dismal run, which saw them in the relegation zone for the first time in 12 years by late October. They were also without a win in their opening 3 games of the Europa League, leaving them bottom of the group. Koeman's management methods were described as showing a lack of consistency and clarity, as the Everton squad looked unbalanced and unequipped for the club's lofty ambitions of becoming a top 4 club.
I still believe that I can change the whole situation, but okay, everybody knows how it works in football.
After a 5-2 home defeat to Arsenal on the 23rd of October, Ronald Koeman was sacked, which meant another hefty compensation package had to be paid. Apparently, when Koeman took the Holland job, Everton were paying the difference on his new job's smaller salary. Reports claimed that Everton were paying around 90% of Koeman's wages, so around 5.5 million until June of 2019. Fuck me, who's making these deals? Jesus. Everton's immediate target was the Portuguese geese, Marco Silva. However, he was already in a job at Watford, a job he'd only been in for 10 games. Despite Everton willing to pay £10 million in compensation, Watford wanted to take Everton to court over this, as they claimed this approach derailed the club's season. While Everton were trying to pull their next manager, David Unsworth was interim. And it went okay on balance, They came back from 2 goals down to beat Watford in a great match, and they smashed West Ham 4-0 with their new manager watching on from the stands, who was soon to take charge. Yes, Everton had their man. I don't think the Everton fans wanted this man, but they had him nonetheless. Their new manager was Sam Allardyce. Yep, the man who started his management career as quite a forward-thinking coach had now gained the reputation as a back-to-basics firefighter who was the man you got in when you said, fuck watching nice football, we just want to stay in the league. Like Koeman, he was also on a £6 million a year contract. Oh, He could even afford to pay for his own dinners with that money. His appointment was not met with much optimism.
Disgrace that Everton have appointed him.
Got to get someone, haven't they? They took the time getting it, like took the 5 weeks to get them. So just hope he does the job for us and keeps us up.
At this point, they might as well take that nothing but the best is good enough off the badge. To be fair, at first things went quite well. They got 12 points from a possible 18 in his first 6 games, and in the winter they made a heavy investment into some attacking talent. Sadly, that attacking talent comprised of Cech Tosin, who they signed for 21 million on a 5-year contract worth 15.6 million, and Theo Walcott for £20 million on a 3-year contract worth 15.6 million. However, this attacking outlay proved to be like putting a nun in front of a glory hole, as they would register 16th in the Premier League for shots on target that season and 19th for shots in general. At one point, they were bottom of both of those tables. They had less shots than adolescents. Do you know what, when I originally wrote that joke was topical. That's how long I've been working on this video. Fucking hard drive. Ugh. Everton's football was not nice to watch, and Allardyce didn't even really bring defensive stability to the club either. However, somehow, probably due to the shiteness of the other teams in the league, Everton finished 8th. And you got to enjoy that Champions League final, didn't you? You bastards. Anyway, despite that, this season was still not a happy one.
You know, he did the job for us. I'm not going to deny that, but the football was atrocious. Obviously, is the big Sam way. Tactically, just a joke. And I went through these lists with my dad, who's obviously, massive Blue. He's been Blue 65 years on this earth, right? And I asked him, out of this list, who's the worst for you? And he actually said Big Sam. He thinks that was the worst manager he's seen at Everton.
The 2017-18 season would also see the club lose Ross Barkley to Chelsea for only 15 million. Again, bringing through young talent only for bigger clubs to profit off them. Allardyce was sacked on the 16th of May.
The reason I went back to Everton wasn't to do the save me job. It was to go and build a big club like that back to greater things, and of course with good finances behind it, which has been what Everton have been short of for a number of years. Would have been the right way, but not to be. And in the end, I knew I was leaving about 2 months before I left. I mean, I do my job, and what the outside world may think of me doesn't affect me anymore, and that's more important to me, because I do the job the owners ask me to do.
Yeah.
That's what you do. So you ask the owners, what do you want me to do? You know what I mean? And if they ask you to do more, say, well, you never asked me to do that in the first place.
He would still receive his full year's salary of £6 million, which even by a professional P45 merchant such as Sam Allardyce was large, as this was his biggest payout when being sacked. His departing staff would also receive 3 months' worth of wages. With a third manager sacking already, the Farhad Bashiri reign looked like one that was going to be characterised by snap judgments and lack of long-term planning. However, at this point, Marco Silva was now single and Everton managed to pull him get in. The club would also get in a new director of football as they replaced Steve Walsh with PSV's Marcel Brands. Steve Walsh, by the way, would also get a nice severance package. Just handing money out, just handing it out. Marco Silva brought in new backroom staff. And on that note, between 2016 and 2022, club employees rose from 274 people to 491 people. In the process, more than doubling the 2016's 77.5 million wages to 162 million in 2022. But anyway, back in 2018, and Everton were once again starting all over again with a new vision for the team. And they had quite a task ahead of them, as the squad stood at 38 players strong. While looking at some of those players, I don't know if strong's the right word, but there were 38 players in the team nonetheless. A number they wanted to get down to 25, so the club needed to make some sales. And that wouldn't be easy, as these players weren't only signed for big fees, but big wages. So the club would take a loss on some of these players, and the players would have to take a pay cut too. The fact that a lot of new acquisitions didn't quite live up to their potential at Everton didn't help matters as well. To make things even worse, these players were a bit on the older side, which further harmed their resale value. However, somehow they managed to get rid of Ramiro Funes Mori for 9.5 million, Davy Klaassen was sold for half of what they paid for him, and they would release a load of players who seemed like FIFA NPCs. Who the fuck is that? Is he a real geezer? Also, Wayne Rooney would once again leave the club, this time on a free transfer. And they had to let a fuckload of players go out on loan. However, their transfer incomings were actually really good. They got in Richarlison for 40 million, Luca Digne for 20 million, Yerry Mina, which they might have overpaid for to be honest, 28 million on a 5-year contract worth 32.1 million. They got Bernard on a free transfer. They would also get in Andre Gomez and Kurt Zouma on loan. So might have overpaid for a few of the players there, but all in all, not bad, not bad. The season would pretty much be same old, as they finished 8th with some inconsistent form and had some shite results like the 6-2 loss to Tottenham or the 2-0 loss to already relegated Fulham. However, they also had some great results like beating Chelsea, Arsenal and a 4-0 victory over Manchester United. They would also almost hold Liverpool to a draw at Anfield. However, right at the end, this happened. Off the pitch, Farhad Moshiri bought 49.9% of the Liver building. The building with the birds on it. And he moved Everton's headquarters into that building and lit the building up blue for Christmas to get some good bragging rights over Liverpool. But it's fine. That Origi goal, that'll do for me, mate, that'll do for me. Yeah, see it again, go on. Yeah, go on, one more time. Let's have another angle, come on. Yeah. The club also revealed designs for the new stadium, which looked like the dog's bollocks. So all in all, not a bad season. Apart from that Origi goal, come on now, one more time. In the summer, they would make some good signings. They made the signing of Andre Gomez permanent for 22.5 million. They got in Fabian Delph for 8.5 million on a 3-year contract worth £12.6 million. They got in Jean-Philippe Garbin for 25 million on a 5-year contract worth £19.5 million. They got in, I'm sorry about the pronunciation by the way, they got in Moise Keane for £25 million plus add-ons. They got in Jared Braithwaite, which would prove to be a great signing for only $750,000, and they got in Alex Iwobi for 28 million plus add-ons. So yeah, they spent a lot. To be precise, they spent £140 million on just 5 players. Fuck, I hope that spending doesn't come back to bite them. Anyway, to be fair, they did offload some players for big fees, but despite this, they still spent more than they brought in. And this would have been a lot worse if they were successful in signing Kurt Zouma and Wilfried Zaha. But new season, more signings, let's see how things got on. Oh fuck. Injuries and bad VAR decisions were certainly responsible for some of the first half of Everton's 2019-20 season, but defensive failings, Silva's reluctance to change formations, the team's lack of ability to convert possession into points on the board, all combined to leave Everton in the relegation zone in early December. They would even lose to the 3 newly promoted teams. A 5-2 thrashing by a second-string Liverpool side would prove to be yet another night to forget. Not for me, of course. I had a great night. I went to a party that night, so it was sort of a night to forget for different reasons. But yeah, great time. This 5-2 defeat proved to be the final straw for the board, and on the 5th of December, Marco Silva was sacked. The 4th manager to be sacked in the Moshiri era, leaving a squad built to suit 4 managers' visions. So therefore, no vision.
The manager that the football club are going to have to appoint not only has to be the manager for the long term, the manager for who the club believe can take the club forward, but he also has to hit the ground running. He also has to be able to get a reaction out of players to potentially pull the club out of the mess.
So who do you turn to when times get rough? You get in Big Dunk. Yes, Duncan Ferguson was given the task as interim manager. His first game would be against Chelsea. The team played a 4-4-2 with Richarlison joined by Dominic Calvert-Lewin up front, instead of being isolated as he would have been under Martinez. Big Dunk was also wearing Howard Kendall's watch for good luck. I imagine Kendall gave it to him, but fuck knows. If Duncan Ferguson takes my watch, I'm not asking for it back, mate. No way. Anyway, the big day came, and wouldn't you know it, they only fucking won. Big Dunk had pulled out a great 3-1 victory. The ground was buzzing, the ball boys were getting hugged, or mugged, I can't really tell when Ferguson's involved. It was a great day. They would lose in the League Cup to Leicester, but they would draw with Manchester United and Arsenal before Dunk's time was up. There was talk suggesting that he should be given the job permanently, but the club are not that mental. What do you think they are, Manchester United? There were a few names in the frame for the job. In fact, David Moyes was close to returning, but instead the new manager would be Carlo Ancelotti. Carlo Ancelotti? What the fuck? Just how? Why? At the time, Carlo Ancelotti was only one of 3 geezers to win the Champions League 3 times. He would in the future go on to be the only geezer to win it 5 times. Not with Everton. A man who'd won the league in 4 of Europe's Big 5 leagues and would subsequently win the Liga to be the only geezer to win the league in all 5 Big 5 leagues. Yes, this geezer would be manager of Everton.
We can't compare. Roll out the red carpet. The king is here.
Fuck me. Hats off to Moshiri. I don't know how you did this, geezer. I don't know how you did it. He would be signed on an estimated £12 million a year contract. And if King Carlo can't get success with your club, I don't think anyone can. Straight away, he had an impact, making the team look more professional and more assured. The whole COVID thing did make this season a bit of a weird one that I think most people would want to forget. However, Everton finished 12th, Anthony Gordon came into the team, and Liverpool would win the league. Yeah, it's a good season. In the summer, the club would get proper serious. In addition to signing the promising defender Ben Godfrey for 20 million, they signed Alain, Doucouré and James Rodriguez. Once the 4th most expensive player in the world, James wasn't exactly at his peak in this time, but still, what a massive deal. It was also a free transfer. This was a bit like when they announced that they'd signed Riquelme, except it wasn't a technical error on the club's website. This was real. The advantage of having a world-class manager at your club was made apparent straight away, with Alan and James both playing for Ancelotti in the past. However, all of these additions came at a cost. James was on a record salary for the club, reportedly anywhere from £150,000 to £250,000 a week. Everton spent over £60 million that summer in the transfer market and recouped close to fuck all, with Morgan Schneiderlin and Fraser Hornby leaving for £1.8 million each, and a whole load of players leaving for a free as Everton continued to take losses on the players that they'd signed. The business model of many clubs outside the elite is to pick up players, develop them and then sell them for much more than they paid for them. Everton, they did the opposite of that. But never mind that for now. Everton once again set their sights on top six, but for a change, it actually didn't sound like a load of bollocks. The team had a flying start to the season. They played with determination, resilience and confidence. The midfield was night and day to what it was before. Alan and Decore were closing down spaces, winning balls, while James was creating chances like no one's business. In his first game, he had created more chances than any Everton player had done for 2 years. Everton was scoring goals for fun. By the first international break, Everton were top of the league, with a 100% record in all competitions. Dominic Calvert-Lewin even had 2 hat-tricks. Shit, maybe they should have played without fans years ago. They could have been the ones bringing them down. Yeah, the fans did help, not only to get Howard's Way to #1 in the iTunes movie charts, but all 3 positions of the iTunes singles charts were occupied by Everton songs. Furlough money well spent, geezers. When Liverpool played Everton on the 17th of October at Goodison, it was a top of the table clash. And clash they did. This 2-2 draw had it all, and may have proved to be the start of the downfall of Everton's season. I mean, it certainly was for us when Jordan Pickford decided to attack Van Dijk. What you doing, geezers? What you doing? The game would also see James pick up an injury and Richarlison pick up a suspension, and as a result, Everton's form would drop. However, it wouldn't drop for too long, as thanks in part to Ancelotti's excellent game management, they managed to get to Christmas in second. Ancelotti made the team incredibly disciplined, employing a low block and getting goals from the break or a set piece. The season would have some high points, like a 5-4 win against Tottenham in the FA Cup, doing the double over Arsenal, and finally winning at Anfield after 21 years. Also, Everton's new over 52,000 seater stadium had finally got planning permission and construction could begin. Farhad Moshiri increased his shares of the club to 92.16 million, in the process injecting 100 million more into the club. However, a rotating injury list exposed a horribly unbalanced squad. Years of uncoordinated, ill-planned transfer strategy took its toll, as results were inconsistent and Everton finished the season 10th, suffering a 5-0 final day thrashing to Manchester City. I don't know if it was this shockingly shit performance, his home being burgled in February, or the lack of funds that he would have in the summer, or maybe all 3, but when Real Madrid wanted him back, I'm sure it wasn't a hard decision to make. On the 1st of June, Carlo Ancelotti resigned from Everton, taking a 50% pay cut in the process. Names set to replace him included Eddie Howe, Nuno Espirito Santo and David Moyes. However, on the 30th of June, they announced a new manager. He would be another highly decorated manager, ex-La Liga winning, ex-Champions League winning, and also an ex-Liverpool manager, who in the past had called Everton a small club. It was the incredibly accurate Rafael Benitez.
And we were trying, but when you play with small clubs, always it's difficult. They play deep and they try to do the same.
This news did not go down well, with a banner being placed outside his house by fans letting him know that they knew where he lived, which could be threatening or could be quite helpful. They might be offering to house it. Who knows? Who knows?
It's written in history that they don't come across the park. And I'm sorry, the world changes, but Everton Football Club doesn't change in that way. I'm sorry, this is my view. I'm not going to go and be heard of seen in the same ground as him.
By the way, they did place the banner outside the wrong house. Thank fuck it didn't confuse it for Big Dunk's house. On another note, the ramifications of the Premier League's profit and sustainability measures, known as PSR, which was an evolution of UEFA's financial fair play, were beginning to be felt. Even though Everton now had their billionaire owner, they might have just got theirs a bit too late, as unlike the pre-PSR old money clubs of Chelsea and Manchester City, Everton couldn't afford to continuously take losses on players with no potential blowback. Their poor transfer decisions, especially since Mashiri came in, meant that they were now hamstrung by how much money that they could spend. It meant once again they had to let a load more players go for next to nothing, or indeed nothing, to reduce their wage bill, in the process taking a loss on even more players. Perhaps the most painful being James Rodriguez, who left after the window closed, and due to COVID meant that Everton fans never really got to see him play for the club in the flesh. What sexy flesh that is. Oh, if I was. It also meant the club were restricted to getting in transfers like Andros Townsend and Salomon Rondon. James to Rondon. Fuck, that's painful. To add to a miserable summer, on the 16th of July, Gylfi Sigurdsson was arrested on suspicion of child sex offences, which wasn't a good look for the club, or Gylfi Sigurdsson. However, when the season started, everything seemed to be actually going quite well. After 4 games, they had only dropped 2 points and were level on points at the top of the table. But it's the hope that kills you. Luckily for me, I can just copy and paste a lot of what I wrote about the previous season here. It started well, then poor performances, injuries, and Everton's form went off a cliff. Before you knew it, calls were back for Benitez to be sacked, and to sack the board, which is always a tough sell when you've got to try and ask someone to sack themselves. Everton fans organised a 27 minutes for 27 years campaign where they would lament their 27-year trophy drought. Oh, thought my dry spell was bad.
We've been the same club with money and without money. Just a club that is completely ran inept. At the top of the club, the people who are making the big decisions keep getting the big decisions wrong consistently. There are people who are brought into the club who absolutely shouldn't be here because they don't understand the club, they don't respect the club, they don't respect the values of the fans, and they don't understand what the fans expect of them. And what the fans expect is not trophies every season and not regularly trips away in the Champions League and the like of that. Fans just expect people to put the best foot forward.
Fans would leave their seats after 27 minutes of their home game with Arsenal. Marcel Brands would resign. Savar Ismailov, a member of the club's board of directors, would also have to step down from his role 4 months into his appointment, as he was soon to be charged with GBH. To make things even worse for the club, Josh King, one of the players that Everton had let go, scored a hat-trick against them when Watford beat them 5-3. The wheels fell off for this season in spectacular fashion, as fans watched on incredulous at Benitez's team selections and decisions over formations. A loss to Norwich City on the 15th of January meant Everton had 1 win in their last 13 games. He had also frozen out Luca Digne, leading to him leaving the club.
As for Everton, I go back to Marcel Brands when he left the club. He was seen sort of as a scapegoat, in my opinion. Ancelotti, before Benitez wanted to take control. Benitez wants to take control now. I guarantee you, if Marcel Brands was still there or director of football was still at the club, Dino would still be at the club as well.
Banners were put out by fans calling for him to go, and they got their wish on the 16th of January when Rafael Benitez was sacked. The cost of compensation for Benitez and his staff would total 10.5 million. Fuck me. My word.
Decisions being made by Mashiri are really poor. He hasn't got a clue what he's doing. Hence, 8 managers on his 3rd director of football, players getting signed left, right and centre. And that comes down to Mashiri. Yes, he's got the money, but he's got no football expertise at all.
So once again, step up Big Dunk. He's like what Voro was for Valencia. This time around, Duncan Ferguson's time in charge as interim coach didn't go well. They lost 1-0 to Villa in the league. A former player once again came back to bite them. This time it was via an assist from Luca Digne. I mean, there's worse defeats to Villa that you could suffer, but enough about that. All the while, the quest for a new manager was mired in acrimony. Fan protests against the board had ramped up. Bill Camwright had something even worse than expat heat. He had Rachel Ziegler heat. As more banners were made, the local printing companies were probably the only ones actually enjoying themselves at this time. Perhaps as a result of this displeasure, the club permanently abolished the AGMs. Even Mashiri's announcement of converting a further £100 million worth of debt into equity in the club didn't appear to assuage the anger of the fans. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, on the 31st of January, Frank Lampard was announced as the 6th managerial appointment of Farhad Mashiri's reign. You might as well just park in a manager's parking space now. You won't be there long. Frank Lampard was a great player, but as a manager he was still proving himself. People were at best unsure of whether he was a good manager or not. People are still unsure now, to be honest. By this point he'd almost guided Derby County to the Premier League, just losing out in the playoff finals. May do an episode on them one day. And he'd almost won the FA Cup with Chelsea, getting them to the final and 4th place in the Premier League. And, as we saw with David Moyes, sometimes taking a gamble on a young, inexperienced manager can actually pay off. So, you never know, might go alright. The club also made some January additions, such as Vitaly Mikalenko for 20 million, Nathan Patterson for 16 million, Donny van der Beek and Dele Alli on loan on a free transfer that can cost 40 million if certain add-ons are activated. Bit of an unusual deal, but it could turn out to be worth it. Everyone knew there was still amazing talent in Dele Alli, and if Everton could unlock it, this would be a bargain. This was in addition to the wages, which were 15.6 million for a 3-year contract. So not such a free transfer, but nevertheless it started pretty well. Well, aside from a loss to Newcastle, they beat Brentford 4-1 in the FA Cup and they beat Leeds 3-0 in the league. However, off the pitch, things were looking less promising as Russia's invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February 2022 led to the EU, the UK and the US, all the abbreviations, freezing the assets and imposing sanctions on Russian oligarchs with ties to Vladimir Putin. Where this negatively affects Everton is because Farhad Mashiri's close mate, former employer, mentor, long-term business partner, next to kin as well probably, was one of them. Alishir Usmanov, who used to be a shareholder in Arsenal along with Mashiri, owned 49% of USM Holdings, a conglomerate which Mashiri chaired and helped found. USM sponsored Finch Farm and bought a 30 million first option on the naming rights for the new stadium. Those naming rights were expected to be worth 200 million. Now, that was all gone. USM's subsidiary, Megaphon, was a key matchday sponsor at Goodison and was also one of the sponsors for the Everton women's team. Now Everton had to suspend all sponsor arrangements with USM, which proved to be a bad financial blow for Everton. In the long term, this would have even more dire implications, as Everton would become increasingly more reliant on Moshiri's personal backing of the club. A hit like this to his net worth would therefore be terrible news for Everton and put them at risk of administration if they were to get relegated. The day after the invasion, they did get a new director of football, Kevin Furwell, who'd been in the role for 12 years at Wolves. So, wasn't all bad. However, on the pitch, things were about to go terrible as the team went on a 4-match losing streak in the league, including a 5-0 thrashing by Tottenham, as the club slid towards relegation. At this point, after 68 years, Everton's reign in the top flight had taken on legendary status and was one of the true remaining monoliths of English football. Big clubs have gone down in the past, but the enormity of this situation felt different. It was one of the key storylines of that Premier League season, as it drew the attention of everyone, even neutrals.
Yes, I guess I'm going down, 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 and I feel I'm gonna drown. Yeah, I guess I'm going down, 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 and I feel I'm gonna drown.
I think if Everton go down, Everton will become a template for every other owner or football club in the Premier League of how not to do it. To spend that much money and find themselves going down. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of the other clubs who've gone down in the Premier League. Has there been a bigger club than Everton to go down?
No.
Everton supporters were acutely aware of the gravity of their situation. So for the remainder of the season, they conspired to make Goodison a fortress. And it proved to be effective. They managed wins against Manchester United and Chelsea and an away victory against Leicester. For the Chelsea game in particular, the Everton fans aimed to create a bear pit of an environment, filling the streets around Goodison Park and letting off smoke canisters. However, drop points in a home game against Leicester and Brentford and away at Liverpool and Watford meant Everton were in a perilous position with 2 games to go. If they didn't win in their final home game of the season against Crystal Palace, they would need a result on the final day to ensure safety, and that was away at Arsenal. Everton fans collectively went fuck that and created a spectacular welcome outside Goodison Park for the match. With the new stadium expected to be completed in the near future, this may very well have been the last top-flight football at Goodison Park, and fans were desperate to see their team off in style. They conspired to create an atmosphere that epitomised the notion of a team having a 12th man. However, when the game started, it seemed to be ineffective. They were down 2-0 at half-time, and they would need that crowd support now more than ever.
It is half-time at Goodison Park. It is not the tale we wanted to tell. Half-time, Everton 0, Crystal Palace 2.
Frank Lampard would change the 3-5-2 to a 4-3-3, brought on Dele Alli, and the next 45 minutes, plus stoppage time, would go down in legend.
Keane, yes! Michael Keane for Everton! Dangerously, Richarlison, it's in! Richarlison squeezed it home! From 2 down, Everton completely impossible. Race ball in! You have the answer! They've done it! Simply heart-stopping stuff at Goodison Park. Calvert-Lewin's winner, 5 minutes from time, to crown an incredible turnaround. It's like 1994 all over again, from 2-0 down to a 3-2 victory. Calvert-Lewin's biggest goal of the season. Everton just never do things the easy way. What is for sure is that Everton are playing Premier League football next season.
Somehow, Everton had come from 2-0 down to win the game 3-2. I remember watching it at work and everyone was going fucking mental. None of us were Everton fans, but you couldn't help getting swept up in it. Absolute scenes. The fans invaded the pitch. Frank Lampard was celebrating on the director's box. He called Seamus Coleman the greatest man in the world afterwards. The geezer from Just Stop Oil wasn't there, so presumably they also ended global warming. All in all, what a night. Everton would get smashed by Arsenal on the final day, but really, who gives a fuck? Despite these amazing scenes, the season was anything but, as the club finished 16th. The season went so badly that Farhad Moshiri penned an open letter to Everton fans apologising. You know you fucked up when an apology text won't do the job. In the letter, it wasn't just Everton's on-field performance that he was apologising for, as Everton had lost a combined 370 million over the previous 3 years. The Premier League's profit and sustainability rules stated clubs could only lose a maximum of 105 million over that time frame, which prompted Leeds United and relegated Burnley to write a letter to the Premier League asking for an independent commission to investigate Everton's financial situation within 6 weeks of correspondence. The fucking grouses. Everton were now facing the possibility of a serious sanction like a fine or a points deduction. Either one would be bad news for the club. After just 6 years as the majority shareholder in the club, Farhad Moshiri was now open to offers for his shares. In an attempt to ease the financial situation, the summer would see them sell Richarlison for 50 million plus 10 million in add-ons, a deal which went through on the final day of the 2021-22 financial year. They would also loan and release a fuckload of players. Now, this difficult financial situation of course didn't stop them from making more signings, which in large part were pretty good. However, most of those signings would come over the course of the transfer window once the season had begun, as a dense injury list meant Everton went into the season plagued with availability problems. This was made even worse in the first game of the season against Chelsea, when Yerry Mina and Ben Godfrey would also be added to the injury list. That first game of the season against Chelsea highlighted their attacking problems, as without Dominic Calvert-Lewin there was service but no one to finish it off. Everton would lose 1-0. They would have a truly terrible start to the season. However, they were working hard for the manager and did manage to sling 2 results together. However, they would then go on another barren run of 3 losses, and you couldn't spin that into a positive. Dominic Calvert-Lewin did come back and would help Everton to a great 3-0 result against Palace. However, they would then go on an 8-match streak in the league without a win, which was actually 10 games if you include the EFL and FA Cup. There was a World Cup in between the fixtures, to be fair, and England got knocked out in the quarters, so there was something for the people of Liverpool to cheer about. But that aside, things looked bleak. The board were too scared to come to games, the team were getting booed off the pitch, and Everton were once again in a relegation fight. In fact, they were joint bottom of the table, with their worst points return after the first 20 games in the club's entire history. And bear in mind, it used to be 2 points for a win back in the day. That's how bad it was. It had gotten so bad that I decided Everton were going to be the first Fallen Giants video. On the 23rd of January, Frank Lampard was sacked, meaning another payout to a departing manager. Since Moshiri took over, the severance bill going to sacked managers and their support staff totalled more than 50 million.
You know what? We can bring in whoever we want. Right now, you can handpick whoever you want. You can bring Pep in. It wouldn't make any difference to this squad of players. It's a championship level squad of players. That's why we're sitting currently second bottom of the table, and that's why it's been a slow decline in the last 6 years.
With just 15 goals in 20 games, Everton badly needed a striker. And it seems as though they might have had one, with Villarreal striker Arnaut Danjuma set to join Everton on loan till the end of the season. He had been providing a decent goal return in Spain, playing for a side that had just got to the Champions League semi-finals. Won't say who they were beaten by. Nah. He was keenly sought after by other clubs, however, he was going to sign for Everton. He had done a medical, done all the media bollocks. Farhad Moshiri did a pre-recorded interview saying Everton would sign a striker before the window closed. It all looked good, but there was a delay on Villarreal's end getting the paperwork through. And in that time, Danjuma must have thought to himself, fuck, Spurs seem a bit less chaotic, let's go there instead. This would leave Everton without a striker, and meant that when Farhad Moshiri's interview went to air, it looked like he was making false promises. Everton would indeed not make any signings in the January transfer window, the only club in the relegation zone not to make a single signing. In fact, they were the only club in the league not to make a signing. And to make things worse for the squad, in that window they would again lose their most promising young academy product, Anthony Gordon. With Everton needing to comply with PSR rules, they were in no position to turn down the 40 million plus add-ons. He did hand in a transfer request and missed 2 training sessions, so not much you can really do. Anthony Gordon would go to the Premier League's recently billionaire-backed club, Newcastle United. A club which highlight the fact it's not just money you need to get success, but you have to have people in the club's infrastructure who can wisely use that money. Which Everton, they did not. Well, I mean, at one time they did have one, but at this current moment he was guiding West Ham to a European trophy. So without a manager, which poor bastard would have the job of turning this season around? The first choice was the ever-eccentric football genius Marcelo Bielsa. However, he wanted to spend the rest of the season managing the under-21s and then take over the first team in the summer so he could implement his plans from the ground up. The Everton board said, fuck that, and went with Sean Dyche. By the way, I don't know about you, but I fucking love Sean Dyche. What a voice that geezer has. Oh, how he's not doing voice acting, I don't know. Bung him in your next Pixar film. Come on.
I've got to learn about the group, going onto the pitch. I know about the fans, that's for sure, and how precious this club is to them, and showing them that we're ready to work and we're ready to give them what they want. And certainly that starts with sweat on the shirt, a bit of effort, a bit of feel, and getting back to some of the basic principles of what Everton Football Club, in my opinion, has stood for a long time.
Everton themselves might have actually needed a turnaround only seen in a Hollywood film to try and rescue their season. Especially seeing as their next opponents were top of the table team, Arsenal. Unbeaten in the Premier League since September, Arsenal were on one hell of a run. Everton fans protesting before the game were clearly unhappy with the board, but they didn't let it sully their support for their club, as they once again helped to turn Goodison into a fortress. And whatever Sean Dyche said to that team in that sexy voice of his, well, it worked, as they somehow managed to win. I remember at the time I was in a phone shop and the game was showing, and the geezers in there, they couldn't believe it either. Everton put in an incredibly disciplined display. What a performance. The geezers in the phone shop as well were great. Really good customer service. Cheers, geezers. After that, results were a bit more mixed. Their home form was good, and they definitely improved their relegation prospects. Well, for a bit. After a victory against Brentford in early March, they didn't win until May, and ended up in another relegation battle. Off the pitch, things weren't looking any better for Everton. March would see the Premier League refer them to an independent panel over charges of breaking PSR rules. This was an unprecedented fuck me, why did I put so many long words in this script? This was an unprecedented occurrence in English football, so no one knew what to expect or when to expect it. Fans were making banners calling for the board members to resign, even club legend, now non-executive director, Graham Sharp. Bill Kenwright was in a war of words with the Everton supporters group all together now, as open letters were getting written back and forth, postage stamps were flying off the shelves. The Everton Fan Advisory Board called a vote of no confidence against Bill Kenwright. There were protests planned ahead of their game against Newcastle. However, Everton's Premier League survival prospects looked so bad, the supporters group had to stop them and create a bear pit atmosphere like the one they'd done the season before. They entered May in the relegation zone with only 5 games to go. They managed a draw against fellow relegation strugglers Leicester City, and somehow they put on a counter-attacking masterclass to beat Brighton 5-1 away from home. They obviously lost to Man City, but only 3-0, so it could be worse. A last-minute goal by Yerry Geezer, more commonly referred to as Yerry Mina, earns them a crucial point against Wolves, meaning going into the final day, survival was in their own hands, but they would still need to beat Bournemouth. And on that final day, in Goodison, in minute 57, this happened. Everton was safe for another year. And I ripped up my script in frustration and decided to do Valencia instead. Off the pitch, while this relegation battle was happening, Moshiri had been attempting to sell the club, even though he publicly denied it. He'd been listening to offers from 777 partners, but those talks didn't come to much at the time. MSP Sports Capital had offered investments of up to 150 million for a minority stake in the club. Ultimately, these talks wouldn't result in a takeover or acquisition of any of the club's shares due to creditors, rights and media effectively having the power to block any future investment deal as per the terms of their loan to Everton back in 2016. However, MSP Sports Capital did give Everton a £100 million loan for their upcoming stadium. They would also get a £100 million loan from 777 partners, which meant more debt for the club, and it wouldn't prove to be enough to cover the ever spiralling costs of the stadium. The stadium was coming along nicely though, it was coming along. All of this must have sent Moshiri's stress levels through that soon-to-be constructed roof, as at this time the British government's Treasury Sanction Police were looking into Moshiri's finances due to his ties to Usmanov, making him a person of interest due to the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. This all meant that Moshiri could end up like Roman Abramovich and not receive a penny for the sale of the club if the government was to subject him to punitive measures or prove Usmanov's money actually funded Moshiri's shares in the club. So Moshiri, he must have been shitting one. In the summer, Everton fans would finally get their wish of boardroom changes, as in June came the announcement of the stepping down of Chief Executive Denise Barrett-Baxendale, Financial Director Grant Ingles, and Non-Executive Director Graham Sharp. On top of all of that, in October, Bill Kenwright would sadly pass away. Despite these boardroom changes, Everton was still financially fucked. 2021-22 financial reports had revealed that in the 6 years since taking over the club, operating costs had exceeded turnover by more than 640 million. After player tradings, this meant Moshiri's pre-tax loss was 400 million. So this of course restricted what they could do in the summer transfer window. They managed to get in Beto for 21.4 million. They also got Yusuf Chermeti for 10.8 million, but the rest were either loans like Jack Harrison and Arnaut Danjuma, or free transfers like the Chris Jericho of football, the unretirable 39-year-old Ashley Young. The meagre player acquisitions were dwarfed by the amount of players leaving the club. A lot were getting released, anything to get the wage bill down. And with this stripped back squad, the season got off to a terrible start. It was 4 league games in before Everton picked up a single point. Moshiri's time at Everton could only be described as a clusterfuck. His fiscal fuckery had led the club's debts to reach over £1 billion. These debts were only 54.8 million when he took over the club in 2016. With all the money he's spent, by this point over 750 million, the day of the 15th of September must have been one that Moshiri had surely been dreaming of. I definitely know the fans were, as this was the day Farhad Moshiri had agreed to sell his 94.1% stake in the club to 777 Partners. It was quite a complicated deal, reportedly worth 500 million, with staggered payments made over a period of years, regarding the club stayed in the Premier League. Everton were about to be added to the portfolio of the Miami-based investment company, which included clubs Genoa, Seville, Hertha Berlin, Vasco da Gama, Melbourne Victory and Standard Liège. However, the deal had yet to pass the fit and proper persons test, but no one ever fails that, so it should be alright. Oh, hold on, 777 would eventually be one of the few to actually fail this test. Fuck me, they must have been well dodgy, my goodness. 777 had missed payments in parts of their existing sporting portfolio, which cast a doubt on whether they actually had the money to buy Everton. The UK government also weren't too keen on 777 and weighed into the matter over their several court cases. 777 and sister company Sutton Park had been accused of fraud, offering illegal loans and failing to pay bills. 777 subsidiaries were also accused of predatory lending practices and racketeering activities, including kidnapping, bribery, extortion and dealing in a controlled substance, all the way to fraud. The two co-founders, Josh Wander and Steve Pascoe, had a proper shady past in their own right, and legal problems would be something they'd share in common with Everton. On the pitch, Sean Dyche had begun to turn Everton's season around, picking up decent results, including a 3-0 victory over Bournemouth. Everton had 14 points, they were sitting outside of the relegation zone in 14th in the league, and were starting to look up the table, but it would seem to be that any good news for the club, there would be something bad lurking round the corner. On the 17th of November, the results of the independent commission Everton had been referred to over PSR breaches was announced. Between March and November, people weren't only left to speculate if the club were guilty, but what would be the punishment. A fine, forced relegation, being stripped of trophies. Well, actually, no, they didn't have to worry about that one. But still, on the 17th of November, it was announced. Everton would be deducted 10 points. The biggest points deduction, not just in Premier League history, but in English top flight history.
It seems as if Everton Football Club are being made scapegoats for something that worse. Could be construed as a minor misdemeanour. It appears to me that the Premier League have attempted to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
I think the only other times in Premier League history when clubs have been deducted points, I think it happened to Portsmouth and Middlesbrough. Yeah. And on both those occasions, both those teams ended up being relegated.
The punishment was determined by an advanced formula that concluded Everton would incur 6 points for the initial breach, then 1 point for every 5 million that they had gone over the 105 million loss threshold. To make it worse, Burnley, Leeds United and Leicester City were threatening to sue Everton in a joint lawsuit for over 300 million over lost earnings due to relegation. They would eventually drop the lawsuit in favour of a negotiated settlement. At the time, Everton were relying on 20 million a month loans from 777 partners to fund day-to-day operations, so any fine imposed may force the club into administration and a further 9-point deduction. So that seems to be a nice gesture by those clubs. What nice geezers. The points deduction took immediate effect on the 17th of November, plunging Everton from 14th to 19th, meaning they were joint bottom of the table with Burnley on 4 points, 2 points from safety. However, what may have broken a lot of teams actually served to galvanise Everton.
Well, myself personally, I'm fuming, but I think we'll all get together now and we'll want to win. We want to get back onto that in that Premiership, stay in the Premiership, and I think we will, to tell you the truth. So we've started playing great now, and this is just another little kick in the face, isn't it? You know what I mean? Yeah. But I honestly think now we'll get better.
They seemingly had an us against the world mentality, and after a 3-0 loss to Manchester United, which had that amazing Garnacho goal, they won 4 games in a row, which included wins against Chelsea and Newcastle United. In the process, they had made up the points that they had lost, and now they are out of the relegation zone. But then, fuck me, they went on a barren run. Oh, it was bad. Injuries and suspensions, and at times just plain being shite, led Everton to a 13-game winless run in the league between late December and early April. To make matters worse, on the 15th of January, Everton were referred to another independent commission for a second alleged breach for profit and sustainability rules for the 3-year period ending 2023. Now, the first charge was related to the 3 years preceding 2022, so it meant there was an overlap in the years that they were being judged on, meaning they're effectively getting punished for the same crime twice. In legal terms, double jeopardy. As mentioned earlier, PSR was new. There was no precedent for this. The governing bodies seemed to be just making it up as they went along. This was a sentiment shared by the Everton fans, who on the 3rd of February staged a protest by holding up yellow cards with "You don't know what you're doing" written on them, being displayed before the game and in the 10th minute. Nevertheless, this meant Everton were facing yet another points deduction, which would take effect in the current 2023-24 season. Everton now had to get ready for this second charge while still appealing the first. Right, they're definitely going down. I started my Fallen Giants Everton script again. On the pitch, results were dire. But on the 26th of February, the results of Everton's appeal were announced, as their points deduction was reduced from 10 points to 6. However, on the 8th of April, the results of the second hearing were announced, and Everton were docked 2 more points, bringing their total points deduction to 8 points. Everton would also appeal this decision. The club and the supporters might have felt hard done by, as Nottingham Forest points deduction was only 4 points, half of what Everton's was. This was despite Nottingham Forest breaching the threshold by 56.6%, which was significantly more than Everton's 34%. The justification given for the disparity in points deduction was that Nottingham Forest breach was only across 1 period, whereas Everton's was across 2, and in their words, because of Nottingham Forest's early admission and exceptional cooperation. To be honest, I'm surprised they didn't get thrown out the league after Bonnie Blue appeared at their home games, but still. Back on the pitch again. In April, Everton finally managed to win a game, beating Burnley 1-0. And after a humbling 6-0 loss to Chelsea, Goodison once again proved to be the club's saving grace, as they won 3 matches in a row, including a painful 2-0 victory over Liverpool, the bastards. Everton would ultimately finish the season in 15th place, 14 points above the relegation zone. By that point, I'd already said fuck it, torn up my script once again, and decided to cover Parma. For me, a very bad end to the season all round.
Would you say your beloved Everton sporting highlight of the last 15 years is? That time they nearly got relegated but didn't, or that other time they nearly got relegated and they didn't? What about the other year when they nearly got relegated and they didn't?
By now, the total loan 777 partners had given to Everton was 200 million. And although there were serious doubts over the investment company, they had an exclusivity deal in regards to taking over the club, and the prospects of them buying Everton were still in the air. However, another creditor, MSB Sports Capital, had a clause in their £158 million loan that meant 777 Partners had a deadline of midnight the 15th of April to provide the funds to pay off the MSP loan. 777 would fail to do this, so MSP had the opportunity to take a 51% interest in the club. It looked like MSP were going to form a consortium with Andy Bell, George Downing, and additional investors, possibly billionaire Michael Dell. That deal didn't come to fruition, so Moshiri extended 777's deadline until the 31st of May. However, 777 wouldn't be able to meet that deadline as the company was imploding, with more court cases and asset seizures. Some of the other potential buyers were a group of investors that included Middle Eastern royalty, the Australian Maya family, who are prepared to submit an all-equity bid in the region of 400 million. Keith Harris and an anonymous geezer were prepared to match it. American billionaire John Textor was also interested, but he would first have to offload his 45% stake in Crystal Palace. However, this takeover saga would come to an end on the 15th of June, when the Freaking Group had agreed a deal to take a 94.1% stake in Everton Football Club. Everton would be the latest club to be part of the new emerging phenomenon in football of multi-club ownership. Dan Freaking, who had a personal fortune of around $9 billion, also owned AS Roma and AS Cannes. However, on the 19th of July, it was announced that the deal was off. The £200 million loan the club received from 777 Partners was tied up in a legal case, which caused Freaking and his lawyers a bit of concern. However, the Freaking Group did agree to inject 200 million of loans into the club, which meant they could pay off debts to MSP Sports Capital. This video is already long enough, and I've already gone through enough Nurofen. For now, the club's future would remain in limbo. To make things worse, the start of the 2024-25 season did not go well. They lost to Brighton 3-0, then 4-0 to Tottenham Hotspur. But they did manage to turn it around against Bournemouth, going into a 2-goal lead, before fucking it up and losing 3-2.
The bit where Dominic Calvert-Lewin puts them 2-0 up and they're celebrating feels like the bit in a horror movie where the family are already happy and together at the start of it. And you know it's a horror movie, so there's a sort of sinister edge to this happiness.
But you're kind of happy for them and you think,
just stay here.
This will probably be fine. Don't go on the camping trip.
Yeah, don't go to the hotel.
But the next game, against Aston Villa, they managed to get into another 2-goal lead, before unbelievably fucking it up again. Honestly, their shitness baffles me sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know really what to say. What can you say? I'm not even surprised, in all fairness.
They lost their first 4 games, leaving them bottom of the table with a -9 goal difference. They did go on to have a brief unbeaten 5-game run after that, and in December managed to pick up a 4-0 victory against Wolves. But by and large, results in the first half of the season weren't good. The loss of Amadou Onana and Ben Godfrey added to the depletion of a threadbare squad, as Everton tried to avoid any further PSR breaches. They did have some new additions like Ndiaye, Jesper Lindstrom, Armando Broja, Jake O'Brien and Aurel Mangala among others, but they weren't the kind of signings that would make you too excited. The results of this austerity-hit transfer window were clear to see on the pitch. It was hard to get the most accurate read on how good his new players were, as Dyche opted for experience over youth, even playing out-of-form players like Doucouré in a number 10 role despite limitations in his link-up play. Dwight McNeil, another one of Dyche's favourites, looked lost in midfield. Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Beto had piss-poor service up front, which resulted in piss-poor attacking output. Attacking in general seemed to be a rarity for the team, as they seemed to have the game plan of doing most of their attacking in the first 20 minutes, and then regardless of whether they had the lead, parking the bus and playing long ball. The summer exit of performance analyst Alex Scanlon proved to be a heavy blow, as the team were no longer dominant from set pieces and looked increasingly vulnerable from them. The training sessions were reported to be an unstructured free-for-all, with rumours of dressing room disharmony. There are unconfirmed rumours that in a pre-season friendly in Portugal he slapped Nathan Patterson. This report is probably bollocks, but it'd be better for the story if it turned out to be true. Come on, be true, be true. The loss of Gerard Brantwaite also hurt them badly in defence, and keeping a 17 million summer signing Jake O'Brien on the bench probably didn't help either. The grand old lady had looked to have gone incontinent at the end of its life, as Everton were leaking goals all over the gaff. After years of pushbacks and delays, going into the 24-25 season, it was confirmed this would be Everton's last season at Goodison, and it looked as though their stadium might not be the only thing they'd be saying goodbye to at the end of the season, as their 71-year reign in the top flight might have been over. However, on the 19th of December, they did get some good news, as it was announced at 10 AM the Friedkin Group had taken over Everton. Well, the official club statement did have a few more words in it than that. Behind the scenes, Dan Friedkin negotiated a deal with Moshiri. He and his lawyers settled the 777 loans. The Friedkin Group came to an agreement to pay back rights and media funding's £225 million loan. They also loaned Everton enough money to get the stadium finished for the 2025-26 season. And so marks the end of one of the worst ownership tenures in Premier League history. The new owners wouldn't wait long before making changes at the club. press conferences seemed to indicate that Sean Dyche knew his fate. However, he may not have expected to be relieved of his duties on the 9th of January, just a few hours before a game. On the day of the game. Fucking madness. It was a third round FA Cup game with Peterborough, but still, fuck me. They confirmed his sacking just 3 hours before kick-off. In the club statement, Sean Dyche wasn't even thanked. To be fair, at least he wasn't sacked during a game like Martin Jol. Everton under-18 coach and club legend Leighton Baines would be interim manager along with club captain Seamus Coleman. Sean Dyche had already picked the squad, so quite an easy job to be fair. That's how soon before the game they sacked him. He'd already picked the squad. Fucking hell. Jesus. Everton would win 2-0. Peterborough didn't play Ashley Young's son, so we didn't get to see father versus son. Stop that Cat Stevens music. Peterborough don't want to have fun. All round, just a shit show. Many names had been linked over the recent weeks, including Graham Potter, who had signed for West Ham so was no longer an option. Another option was Jose Mourinho. I mean that would be class. However, the Freaking Group didn't care about the end of my video, and they would give it to the man who was the firm favourite. On the 11th of January, it was announced David Moyes was back.
Well, sorry, y'all niggas minds fucking with me. I know somebody has told you about fucking with D.
In the near 12 years away from Everton, he started the demise of Manchester United. Yes, my son, doing God's work there. Go on, geezer. He went to Real Sociedad, didn't do a great job, got relegated with Sunderland, but had 2 successful stints at West Ham United, getting them into Europe in 3 consecutive seasons, in one of them getting to the Europa League semi-final and winning the Europa Conference League in another. The prodigal prune was back.
I don't give a fuck about y'all niggas, cause y'all ain't killing nothing.
They were sitting in 16th, 1 point above the relegation zone, and with pretty much no money to spend in January, he would have one hell of a job. After losing to Aston Villa in his first game back, they came up against the antidote to any drop in form, Tottenham Hotspur. And this 3-2 victory kick-started an incredible run of form. They won the next 2 games, one of them battering Leicester City 4-0, but then they had the final Merseyside derby at Goodison, which annoyingly was rescheduled to when Everton were actually doing well. Fuck's sake.
Beto, chance. Goal! Teased in, and the header makes it 1-1. Everton in front for 4 minutes. O'Brien had to be careful. There's Jones and Salah. Beto, Irabuna, Tarkovsky. What a finish to the last game of derby at Goodison.
No added time for that VAR check, by the way. I'm not bitter, I'm just saying. Everton kept their 9-game unbeaten run going into April, firmly lifting themselves clear of any relegation worries. Their unbeaten run only being ended by the eventual champions, 20-time champions, Liverpool, in a game where Tarkovsky settled on trying to murder the opposition rather than score against them. Fuck me, what are you doing? Kids might be watching that. So Everton, a team so frustrating they couldn't even get failure right. In the end, Everton managed to get quite a pedestrian 13th place finish. The Moyes had arrived pre-season and saved Everton for a second time, getting 31 points from 19 games. Didn't expect that to get sexual. After 133 years, one of the most iconic football stadiums in English football closed its doors. And then opened them again because the women's team's going to play there. But still, for the men's team, it closed its doors, and it got one hell of a send-off.
I've lost at love before. I got mad and I closed the door. But you said, why don't you try just once more? I chose you for the one. Now I'm having so much fun. You've always treated me kind. I'm about to lose my mind. You made me so very happy. And I'm so glad you came into my life. Came into my life. You came into my life.
The new stadium on Bramley Moor Dock, named the Hill Dickinson Stadium, originally estimated to cost $350 million to be completed by 2022, $550 million over budget and 3 years behind schedule, was finally finished and ready to play in. The stadium would have an over 52,000 seating capacity and would be state of the art. Everton would also have a complete overhaul of their backroom staff, with only 8 of 18 key staff positions being retained from the Moshiri era. I've not got time to go into all the details, and really, who gives a shit? The main point was that they would completely revolutionise their backrooms model to adopt a model more similar to other franchises in the Three King group. They even bought an entire company in Pursuit Sports and hired its owner, Chris Howarth, so they would now have a more analytical side to the scouting and playing side of things. Fucking nerds. So all in all, this would be a new future for Everton. To make things even better, the new Hill Dickinson Stadium would be a host stadium for Euro 2028. On the negative side, England might be playing there. Goodison is also not set to be getting knocked down, but instead will now house their women's team, which is class, being a lot easier to get a ticket. Despite the £53 million loss for the 2023-24 season, the 7th successive year of loss-making, Everton currently have no outstanding PSR issues. So in the summer, the club could actually make some proper fucking signings. They got in Carlos Alcaraz for £12.6 million, Tierno Barry for £27.5 million, Kiernan Dewsbury Hall for £25 million, Tyler Diblin for £35 million, and for the cherry on top, a loan for the sole geezer number 1, Jack Grealish. And what a signing he'd turn out to be. They also got rid of Neal Maupay, which has to be a boost for any dressing room. In addition, they got rid of 40-year-old Ashley Young. He can trade his blue shirt for a blue bus pass. Needless to say, a lot has changed at Everton. And honestly, I could never have foreseen Everton would be in such a prosperous position when I started this video series, so calling them a fallen giant looks a bit dubious. While the road back to the glory days is still a long way ahead, any fears of relegation are now a long way behind them. At the time of recording, of course. Anyway, there's a lot to be optimistic about in Everton's future, and that must be a pleasant change for the club that has suffered the effects of a European ban, points deductions, Russian sanctions, bad timing, bad investments, not spending enough money, spending too much money, getting players too late, selling players too soon, having a divided dressing room, a boardroom civil war, protests against the manager, protests against the board, protests against the footballing authorities. They've had inept owners, dodgy owners, shadow owners, borrowed against the club's future, been in debt to seemingly every bank that there is. Ones I didn't even know existed. In fact, I'm convinced they don't. Not confident I've got the right logos at all. They've stayed up when they should have gone down, fallen short when greatness was in their grasp. They knackered my fucking hard drive. They've been fucked around, fucked over, fucked with, and sometimes just been fucking shit. The Overton window for what can go wrong at a football club is pretty much the story of Everton, as they've seen it all. So much so, it should be called the Everton window. In April of 2021, top teams from around Europe declared their participation in the new league, the European Super League, with the top 6 teams in England intended to take part. Nearly 3 decades after the last time a breakaway league was attempted, the absence of Everton this time round rubber-stamped how far the club has truly fallen. See, they are a falling giant. It counts, it counts. The world of football when I started this journey is much different to the one we're in now, and who knows how the club will navigate the rough tides of football's present, and what will greet them on the horizon in football's future. Maybe the future of football might be blue, but all I know for sure is that challenge by Tarkovsky was definitely a fucking red. It's just fucking madness, madness.
If not for you, babe, I couldn't even find the door. I couldn't even see the floor. I'd be sad and blue if not for you. If not for you.